Hey, dear members of the Soul Stories family. Today we will bring you a romantic love story, so let's get started. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any meaningful stories. Seattle, one April night in 2025, rain fell relentlessly, as if the entire sky were weeping for Vivian Grant's losses. She stepped out of the King County Courthouse, her high heels caked with mud, her navy silk dress, the one she'd chosen to appear strong before her husband's lawyer, now soaked and clinging to her skin. The court had just ruled that she'd lost G-Tech, the company she'd spent 10 years building from a scribbled idea on a napkin. Michael, the husband she'd once loved blindly, had secretly transferred her shares to himself and his new lover, her former assistant, whom Vivian had trusted. She had nothing left, no company, no reputation, not even faith in herself. Vivian stood at the bus stop on Pine Avenue, a few blocks from the courthouse. She had no umbrella, no coat. The icy rain seeped through her dress, making her shiver uncontrollably. The dim streetlights cast a glow on her face, her sad brown eyes, her disheveled black hair sticking to her cheeks. She didn't cry, not because she was strong, but because her tears had run dry during long nights alone in a rented apartment. She just wanted to leave, to go anywhere, as long as it was away from this city that had once been her kingdom. The bus stop was deserted, with only an old sign listing routes and a few wet plastic chairs. Vivian hugged herself, trying to hold on to the last traces of warmth. She didn't know when the next bus would come, nor did she care. All she saw was a vast emptiness, the future she'd once envisioned now reduced to shards. Where did I go wrong? She asked herself, but no answer ever came. Soft footsteps echoed through the rain. Vivian looked up, wary. A man appeared from around the corner, wearing a gray baseball cap, a plaid shirt, and faded jeans. He held a small umbrella but didn't use it to shield himself, letting the rain soak his shoulders. He stopped a few steps away, his green eyes looking at her with genuine concern, free of judgment. Vivian tightened her grip, ready to brush him off if he tried to talk. She was too exhausted for empty platitudes, but he didn't say much. He took off his worn denim jacket, stepped forward, and gently draped it over her shoulders. "You look like you need it more than I do," he said, his voice low and warm, as if speaking to an old friend. Vivian froze, her lips parting, but no words coming out. The jacket still held his body's warmth, smelling faintly of fabric and wood, a stark contrast to the biting cold of the rain. She studied him, searching for any hint of ulterior motive, but found only a faint smile, not dazzling, but enough to ease the darkness in her heart. "Thank you," Vivian whispered, her voice hoarse from the cold and tangled emotions. She pulled the jacket tighter, as if it were a fragile shield against the world. The man nodded, then turned and walked away, his small umbrella tilted over his head. He vanished into the rain before she could ask his name or anything else. Only the steady patter of rain remained, and Vivian, for the first time that day, felt a tiny spark pierce her frozen heart. She sat on the plastic chair, the oversized jacket dwarfing her slender frame, but offering a strange sense of safety. She didn't know why such a small gesture made her want to cry. Perhaps because it was so unexpected, so sincere in a world she'd grown used to deceit. Vivian gazed at the hazy road, where car lights streaked by like aimless beams. People like him don't last long, she thought, the bitter voice in her head reminding her that kindness often came with a price. The rain kept falling, but Vivian no longer shivered. She reached into her purse for her phone to check the bus schedule, but her fingers brushed a small piece of paper inside the jacket pocket. Frowning, she pulled it out. It was a folded note, its edges worn, with neat handwriting. "Eli, 206-555-0123. Call if you need a computer fixed or just to talk." Vivian read it again, disbelieving. He'd left his number not to boast or demand anything, but as a simple, open invitation. She let out a small laugh, a faint sound blending with the rain. The smile startled her. How long had it been since she'd smiled so naturally? She clutched the note, unsure why she didn't throw it away. Perhaps because it was the only remnant of that strange moment, when a stranger had seen her, not Vivian Grant, the failed CEO, but just a person who needed warmth. In another corner of the city, Eli Turner stepped into his small apartment, his wet shoes leaving footprints on the old wooden floor. He hung his umbrella on a hook, peeled off his soaked shirt, and tossed it into the washer. The apartment was modest, with just enough room for a worn sofa, a desk cluttered with computer parts, and a few family photos on the wall. He poured a cup of cold coffee from the pot, sat down, and looked out the window, where the rain still raged. Eli didn't dwell on what had happened. He'd seen the woman at the bus stop, shivering and looking like she'd lost everything. He didn't know who she was, nor did he need to. He just couldn't walk by without doing something. She'll probably toss the jacket, he told himself, shrugging. That denim jacket had seen him through 3 winters. Losing it wasn't a big deal. But deep down, he hoped she'd keep it. Not because he wanted to see her again, but because he believed a little warmth could sometimes pull someone out of the dark. He didn't know that. At that moment, the note in the jacket pocket was in Vivian's hands, and their fates had just brushed against each other in a fleeting moment, like a raindrop hitting a lake, sending out ripples they couldn't yet see. Vivian stood as the bus's headlights flickered in the distance. She tucked the note into her dress pocket and pulled Eli's jacket tighter around her. The bus stopped, its doors opened, and she stepped aboard, carrying a feeling she couldn't name. Not hope, but something close. She didn't know where she was going, but for the first time in months, she felt she wasn't entirely alone. The next morning, faint sunlight slipped through gray clouds, illuminating the narrow Seattle street where Vivian woke in a modest hotel room. She sat on the edge of the bed, the stranger's denim jacket, Eli's, as the note had said, neatly folded on a chair. She'd meant to throw it out, but for some reason kept it. The note with his phone number lay on the table, its edges slightly creased from her restless fingers, touching it all night. Vivian stared at the number, her thumb hovering over her phone before pausing. Just to return the jacket, she told herself, though a doubtful voice in her head questioned whether anyone could be that kind without expecting something in return. She took a deep breath and dialed. The phone rang 3 times before a warm, low voice answered. "Hello? This is Eli." Vivian faltered, unused to starting a conversation without a clear purpose. "Hi, I'm the person from the bus stop last night. I want to return your jacket." On the other end, Eli let out a soft chuckle, so genuine it made her pause. "No rush, but if you want, I'm nearby. There's a little coffee shop on Pine, a few steps from the bus stop. You free?" Vivian hesitated. She could mail the jacket or just leave it somewhere. But something in his voice, unpushy, non-judgmental, made her nod, though he couldn't see. "Okay, I'll come." She hung up, put on a simple sweater and jeans, deliberately choosing clothes far removed from her former sharp CEO image. She held the denim jacket in her hands, a reminder that this was just a small errand, nothing more. The Bean and Breeze coffee shop was tucked into a street corner, its glass door fogged with steam and the air rich with the scent of roasted coffee. When Vivian pushed the door open, a wind chime tinkled and she spotted Eli immediately. He sat at a table near the window, wearing a light blue shirt, a cup of black coffee in front of him. He looked up, his smile creasing small lines around his eyes. "You made it," he said, standing to pull out a chair for her. Vivian felt a touch awkward, unaccustomed to such casual chivalry. She placed the jacket on the table, saying quickly, "Thanks again. I didn't want to keep your stuff." Eli shrugged, sliding the jacket toward himself but not picking it up. "It looks better on you than me. Keep it a few more days, no big deal." He ordered a latte for her without asking, as if sensing she needed something warm. Vivian sat, cradling the latte, its heat soothing the lingering chill in her chest. "I'm Vi," she said, choosing a short, harmless name. She didn't want to be Vivian Grant, not today. They started talking, at first just small talk. Eli shared about his neighborhood on Seattle's outskirts, where neighbors still brought each other cookies and held weekend barbecues. "Out there, people don't pretend to be someone they're not," he said, his eyes lighting up. "If you need a pipe fixed or just want a beer, someone's always got your back." Vivian listened, surprised by how he spoke of life with such simple appreciation. She was used to tense boardrooms where everyone wore masks to claw for power. Eli's world sounded like a fairy tale. Beautiful, but hard to believe. Sounds peaceful, she said, her tone tinged with skepticism. Eli tilted his head as if catching something in her response. Peaceful, but not perfect. I just think everyone deserves a new day, no matter how bad yesterday was. His words touched a raw spot deep inside Vivian, where she'd locked away her pain. She looked down at her latte, afraid that meeting his eyes would reveal how much she was trembling inside. Eli didn't press her to share about herself. He just talked more about his computer repair job, about the time he accidentally wiped a client's hard drive because he forgot to back it up, and how he learned mistakes weren't the end. Vivian laughed, her first real laugh in weeks, and it startled her. You seem forgiving, she said, unsure if she meant him or herself. Eli shrugged. Maybe, or I just don't like holding on to things that weigh me down. The conversation lasted longer than Vivian planned. She lost track of time, ignoring her phone buzzing in her bag. When Eli stepped away to grab another glass of water, she checked her messages. A text from Claire, her old assistant, popped up. Vivian, you need to come back to G-Tech. Michael's screwing everything up. Don't let all your work go to waste. Vivian gripped the phone, feeling an invisible hand pulling her back to her old world, where she'd been a queen, but also a prisoner. She turned the phone off, stuffed it in her bag, and decided that today, she didn't want to be Vivian Grant. She wanted to be Vi, just for a little while. When Eli returned, he didn't ask about the fleeting tension on her face. He just slid a small plate of cookies across the table, saying, You should try these. My neighbor Helen made them. She says cookies can fix anything, except broken computers. Vivian smiled, took a bite, and in that moment, she felt lighter, as if the world wasn't pressing down on her shoulders. When they left the shop, the sky had cleared. Eli held the jacket but handed it back to her. Keep it one more day. I'm not in a hurry. Vivian started to protest but nodded, clutching the jacket to her chest. Thanks, Eli, she said, saying his name for the first time, and the sound made her heart stir faintly. He waved, walking off toward the road leading to the suburbs, leaving Vivian standing there, curious about this man and about herself, who wanted to linger in this little neighborhood just a bit longer. Vivian stood in the middle of her newly rented apartment, the faint smell of old paint and damp wood lingering in the air. The apartment was on the second floor of a 3-story building in a Seattle suburb, where maple trees blazed red each fall, and the sound of children playing echoed from the backyard. It was a far cry from the lavish penthouse she'd once shared with Michael. No floor-to-ceiling glass windows, no assistant knocking each morning, just a single bed, a chipped wooden table, and a tiny kitchen corner with a kettle that hummed noisily. But that simplicity let her breathe easier, as if she were shedding a skin that no longer fit. She opened her laptop, fingers gliding over the keyboard, and started writing. Journey from Ashes, she named the anonymous blog, with no profile picture or personal details. The first words poured out like a flood, about losing everything, sleepless nights, the fear she'd never find herself again. She didn't expect anyone to read it, just needed a place to release the fragments of her heart. When she hit publish, she closed the laptop, feeling a slight relief. A knock at the door broke her thoughts. Vivian startled, wary. She wasn't used to unannounced visitors. Through the peephole, she saw Eli, holding a small toolbox and a foil-covered plate of cookies. She opened the door, managing a polite smile. Hi, what are you doing here? Eli shrugged, his familiar smile easing the air. Heard your outlet's busted. Mrs. Helen told me to check it out. Oh, and these are her cookies. She doesn't let anyone go hungry. He handed her the plate, the warm scent of cinnamon and vanilla making her stomach rumble. Eli stepped inside, quickly locating the burnt outlet in the kitchen. He worked neatly, fixing it while recounting the time he, overconfidently, wrecked Mrs. Helen's entire lighting system. Vivian leaned against the doorway, smiling despite herself. Something about Eli, his effortless sincerity, made her want to listen, though she kept her distance. When he finished, she offered him a glass of water, and they sat at the kitchen table sharing the cookies. Who's this Mrs. Helen, so thoughtful? Vivian asked. Eli grinned. She's like the neighborhood mom, taught school for 30 years, now retired but still looks after everyone. You should meet her. Vivian didn't plan to agree, but when Mrs. Helen appeared at the door, her eyes twinkling behind round glasses, Vivian couldn't say no. Vi, right, I'm teaching painting to the kids at the community center tonight. Come help out? They love new faces. Vivian shook her head, claiming she wasn't good with kids, but Mrs. Helen's warm gaze made her nod reluctantly. That evening, the community center, an old brick building with weathered walls, glowed with light. Kids ran around the room, hands smeared with paint. Vivian stood in a corner, awkward with a brush in hand, until a 7-year-old girl with 2 braids tugged at her shirt. "Miss, help me draw my dream house." The girl, Mia, spoke with bubbling excitement. Vivian knelt, helping Mia paint a small house with a chimney and a flower garden. Mia shared that she wanted a home, always warm, where no one fights. Her innocent words struck Vivian, stirring memories of the days she dreamed of a home, before ambition and Michael swallowed that dream. When the class ended, Mia hugged Vivian, whispering, "You draw so good. Come back tomorrow, okay?" Vivian smiled, her heart softening a fraction. She glanced around, spotting Eli at the door, stacking chairs with Mrs. Helen. He caught her eye, giving a thumbs up as if in praise. Vivian looked away, shy, but couldn't deny the warmth spreading inside her. Walking home, she thought of Mia, Mrs. Helen, this neighborhood, where people seemed to treat her kindly without needing to know who she was. Yet fear lingered, whispering that opening her heart would only lead to more hurt. The next morning, Vivian opened her laptop, intending to write another blog post. She froze when she saw her first post had over 200 views, with a few comments from strangers. "Thanks for speaking for me. Don't give up." An anonymous user had shared it on an online forum, making it spread quickly. Vivian shut the laptop, her heart pounding. She was thrilled her words were heard, but anxious. If someone recognized her as Vivian Grant, everything could collapse. One weekend afternoon, golden sunlight spilled across the neighborhood. Vivian stood in Mrs. Helen's backyard, awkwardly wielding a small shovel as Eli guided her. They were helping Mrs. Helen replant a tulip bed, a task Vivian never imagined herself doing. Dirt clung to her fingernails, but she didn't complain. Eli, beside her in a rolled-up t-shirt, worked while recounting the time he mistakenly grew cucumbers instead of tomatoes. "I'm no farmer, Vi, but at least I try," he said, winking. Vivian laughed, the sound so clear it surprised even her. They rested under an oak tree, sharing a bottle of cold water. Vivian spoke of her college days when she dreamed of building an app to help people with disabilities communicate. "I thought I could change the world," she said, her voice tinged with regret. She stopped, afraid saying more might slip into G-Tech. Eli looked at her, his gaze gentle. "You still can, Vi. Good ideas don't die." His words were simple but made her want to believe, even just a little. As the sun set, Eli pulled a steel thermos from his bag and handed it to her. "This is for you. I noticed you like iced tea. This'll help." Vivian took it, her fingers tracing the engraving. "Faith comes back, one step at a time." She looked up, eyes misty with emotion. "How did you know I needed this?" she whispered. Eli shrugged, smiling softly. "Just a hunch." Her smile then, natural, unguarded, made Eli's heart skip. He told himself to slow down, that she probably saw him only as a friend. That night, Vivian sat in her apartment, clutching the thermos, writing a new blog post about finding light in small things. She didn't know that, in downtown Seattle, Michael was reading an article about an anonymous blog going viral, its descriptions sparking his suspicion. "Vivian," he muttered, eyes cold, "you can't hide forever." He called his assistant, ordering a search for the suburban neighborhood, where Vivian was slowly rediscovering herself. Early summer sunlight filtered through maple trees, casting a gentle gold over the Seattle suburb. Vivian had been here nearly a month, and each day she shed a bit more of Vivian Grant, failed CEO to become Vi, a woman learning to live slowly. Her small apartment now held a cactus on the windowsill, a surprise gift from Mia, the girl from painting class. She grew accustomed to birds chirping at dawn, Mrs. Helen calling kids to dinner, and Eli's laughter when he showed up with a new story. Today, Vivian stood in the community center's kitchen, apron on, chopping vegetables beside Mrs. Helen and other neighbors. They were preparing a charity meal for struggling families in the area. The aroma of pumpkin soup mingled with lively chatter. Vivian, who once ordered takeout through apps, now enjoyed learning to season from Mrs. Helen. "You've got a knack, Vi," Mrs. Helen said, winking. "Keep this up and I'll hand you the kitchen." Vivian laughed, her cheeks flushed from the heat and a simple joy she'd never known. After the meal, she followed Eli to the back of the community center, where a weathered wall awaited repainting. Eli handed her a brush, eyes twinkling mischievously. "Ready to be an artist?" Vivian raised an eyebrow, holding the brush like a pen in a boardroom. "I'm better at negotiating than painting, Eli." He laughed, sweeping long strokes of blue paint. "Negotiate later. Just slap some paint on. No one's judging." They worked side by side, soft country tunes playing from an old radio. Vivian accidentally splattered paint on Eli's shirt, and he retaliated with a blue streak across her cheek. She yelped, feigning anger. Then they burst into laughter, chasing each other around the paint cans like kids. Resting on the steps, clothes speckled, Vivian felt her heart lighter than ever. "You make me feel 18 again," she said, her voice laced with surprise. Eli looked at her, smiling gently. "Good, right? 18's got no big worries." The talk turned to failures. Eli shared about Sarah, his ex, who left him for someone with bigger prospects. "She said I was too ordinary," he said, not bitter but accepting. "But I like ordinary. It's real." Vivian listened, a part of her stirring. She wanted to tell the truth, but instead spoke of a friend betrayed by a lover, stripped of everything she'd built. "That friend, she doesn't know who to trust anymore," she whispered, eyes on her paint-splattered shoes. Eli placed a hand on her shoulder, light but steady. "She'll find someone trustworthy. She just has to let herself." His words made Vivian want to cry, but she only nodded, afraid saying more would reveal too much. She loved these moments, bright days with Eli in the neighborhood, but fear lingered. If he knew she was Vivian Grant, would he still look at her the same? That evening, Vivian checked her blog, Journey from Ashes. She froze, seeing thousands of views with comments brimming with emotion. "Your post made me cry. Keep going. You're not alone." The blog had become a phenomenon, spreading across forums and social media. Vivian shut her laptop, heart racing. She wanted to keep writing, but feared the spotlight would find her, shattering this fragile sanctuary. Mrs. Helen's backyard glowed with paper lanterns strung on ropes, twinkling like tiny stars against the suburban Seattle sky. The weekend BBQ turned the neighborhood into one big family, the smoky aroma of grilled meat mingling with roasted sweet potatoes and bursts of laughter. Vivian stood by the food table, holding a cold glass of lemonade, smiling as Mia darted by, clutching a plate piled with cornbread, her face smudged with crumbs. Dressed in a pale yellow sweater and jeans, her hair tied up simply, Vivian bore no trace of designer dresses or CEO glamour. For the first time in years, she felt she belonged somewhere. No titles, no boardrooms, just Vi, the new neighbor in this community. Mrs. Helen passed by, resting a hand on her shoulder, eyes sparkling behind round glasses. "You're brightening this place up, Vi," she said, her voice warm like an embrace. Vivian smiled, cheeks flushing, a cozy feeling spreading through her. She glanced at the yard where Eli was flipping meat on the grill, his blue shirt sleeves rolled up, revealing tanned, strong arms. He looked up, catching her eye, and his smile, gentle, genuine, made her heart skip. She turned away quickly, telling herself they were just friends, but she couldn't deny the flutter whenever he was near. Wanting to escape the thought, she stepped into the kitchen for more napkins, savoring a moment of quiet amid the country music and laughter outside. The kitchen door creaked, and Tom, Eli's best friend, walked in, holding a beer can, his hair tousled by the evening breeze. He looked at Vivian, frowning as if trying to place her. "Hey, Vi, you seem so familiar," he said, curiosity mixed with surprise. Vivian forced a smile, her heart tightening, hoping he'd drop it. She busied herself with the stack of napkins, but Tom pressed on. He took a swig of beer, then spoke louder, drowning out the music outside. "You look exactly like Vivian Grant, the G-Tech CEO, the one with the big divorce all over the news." Time seemed to stop. The laughter outside fell silent, leaving only the sizzle of meat on the grill and the pounding of Vivian's heart. Blood drained from her face and the lemonade glass suddenly heavy, as if pulling her under. She turned slowly and saw Eli at the door, his hands red from the grill, now hanging limp. His green eyes met hers, flashing confusion, then shifting to something deeper, hurt, as if the woman he knew had become a stranger. "Is Tom right?" he asked, his voice low but sharp, cutting through the stifling silence. Every eye turned to Vivian. Mrs. Helen stopped chopping vegetables. Mia stared, clutching her cornbread, and the neighbors she'd grown fond of looked at her with curiosity tinged with doubt. She wanted to run, like she had in tense boardrooms, hiding pain behind a polished smile. But this time she stood still, took a deep breath, and felt her chest expand. "Yes," she said, her voice steadier than she expected, though her heart ached. "I'm Vivian Grant." Silence fell, heavy as a lead blanket. Eli said nothing, just stared, his eyes searching for Vi, the woman who'd laughed with him while painting walls, who'd shared cookies with Mrs. Helen, in the shadow of Vivian Grant, a name tied to headlines and scandal. Tom mumbled an awkward apology, rubbing his neck, realizing he'd broken something. The party's warmth turned stiff, joy replaced by unease. Vivian felt her heart constrict, as if an invisible thread between her and Eli had been stretched taut, ready to snap. She feared his gaze would grow distant, that the sincerity she cherished would vanish like smoke. I didn't mean to hide it forever," she said, but her words felt frail, like an excuse too weak to convince even herself. Eli nodded, but his eyes held a conflict, as if wrestling between trust and disappointment. He turned back to the grill, quietly resuming his work, his shoulders tense. Vivian stood there, feeling she'd lost something precious. Mrs. Helen stepped forward, taking her hand gently, her voice soft but firm. "Don't worry, dear. Truth is hard at first, but it'll lead you where you need to be." Vivian nodded, but inside she wasn't sure if truth was enough to keep her in this place she'd started to call home. As the party wound down, the lanterns dimmed and neighbors trickled out, a sleek car pulled up in front of Mrs. Helen's house, its headlights slicing through the dark. Claire, Vivian's former assistant, stepped out, her sharp black business dress stark against the neighborhood's simplicity. She strode toward Vivian, heels clicking on the path, her eyes cold but determined. "Vivian," Claire said, skipping pleasantries, "you need to come back to Seattle. G-Tech's collapsing, and Michael says only you can save it. Don't throw everything away for—" She glanced around, the yard strewn with balloons, the table littered with cornbread and lemonade, her eyes dripping with judgment. "This." Vivian froze, clutching the now cold lemonade glass. The weight of her old world, boardrooms, contracts, camera flashes, crashed over her like a wave, tearing her in two. On one side was G-Tech, where she'd been a queen, now just ruins of her past. On the other was this neighborhood Eli, and the bright days she barely dared believe could last. She looked at Claire, then glanced at Eli, still by the grill, quietly cleaning, as if he hadn't heard. But she knew he was waiting, not for her answer to Claire, but for her answer to him, to the Vi he trusted. Rain returned to Seattle, not torrential like the night Vivian met Eli, but enough to blur the streetlights and drape the suburban neighborhood in a quiet gloom. Vivian sat on the floor of her small apartment, an open suitcase before her, clothes and personal items stuffed in haphazardly. She'd planned to leave, not because she wanted to, but because she didn't know if she could stay after what happened at the BBQ. Eli's gaze, his silence when she admitted she was Vivian Grant, cut into her like a sharp blade. She feared the sincerity she'd found in him, in this neighborhood, was just an illusion that would dissolve once the truth was out. She paused, staring out the window where rain streaked the glass. Her phone had been buzzing since morning, not from Eli, but from unknown numbers and reporters' texts. Her blog, Journey from Ashes, had been unmasked. A morning article headlined "Former G-Tech CEO anonymously pens confessional blog" had thrust her back into the spotlight she tried to escape. "Where is Vivian Grant now?" it asked, with guesses pointing to the suburb. She turned off the phone, but the feeling of being hunted choked her. A message from Michael that morning had made things messier. Vivian, I need you back at G-Tech. Advisory role, just in name. You're still the face of the company. Don't let emotions ruin what we built. His offer sounded like an invitation, but Vivian knew better. It was a trap to drag her back to a world of fake smiles and cold contracts. She hated how he said we, as if he hadn't stolen everything. She shoved a sweater into the suitcase, then stopped when her hand brushed Eli's denim jacket, still tucked in a corner of the closet from when she'd meant to return it. She pulled it out, holding it close, the faint smell of old fabric and wood stirring memories. The rainy night at the bus stop, painting walls with laughter, the thermos with its hopeful engraving. She rummaged through the pocket, finding the worn note, Eli 206-555-0123. Call if you need a computer fixed, or just to talk. She read it over and over, and for the first time in days she cried. Not from despair, but because she realized she didn't want to leave him. Didn't want to lose the bright days he'd brought her. A soft knock sounded at the door. Vivian wiped her tears and opened it to find Mrs. Helen, holding a dripping umbrella. Saw your light on, she said, her voice gentle. Can I come in? Vivian nodded, letting her inside. Mrs. Helen glanced at the suitcase, then at Vivian, her eyes seeing through every fear. You planning to go, Vi? Vivian looked down, silent. Mrs. Helen sat on a chair, taking her hand. I don't know your whole story, but I've seen how you smile with Eli, how you play with Mia. Don't let fear steal the best thing you've got, dear. Her words cracked the ice around Vivian's heart. I'm scared if I stay, I'll ruin everything, she whispered. He doesn't need someone like me. Mrs. Helen shook her head. Don't you see how his eyes light up when he looks at you? Don't decide for him. She stood, leaving a plate of freshly baked cookies, and walked out, leaving Vivian with her tangled thoughts. A few blocks away, Eli sat in his apartment, the computer screen's glow lighting his face. He wasn't working, just staring at an old photo of his dad, who taught him kindness was always worth it. But tonight he wondered if he was good enough for someone like Vivian, a CEO from a world he'd never touched. He wasn't angry she'd hidden the truth, but it made him feel small, like everything he'd offered was just temporary. The rain fell harder, drumming steadily on the roofs of the Seattle suburb, a mournful melody blending with Vivian's racing heartbeat. She stood at Eli's door, her dark green sweater soaked and clinging to her, black hair plastered to her cheeks, raindrops rolling down her chilled face. She'd walked from her apartment without an umbrella, as if wanting the rain to wash away the fear and doubt that had trapped her since the fateful BBQ. Her hand trembled as she raised it to knock, heart pounding, unsure if Eli would still want to see her after learning the truth. That she was Vivian Grant, not just Vi, the simple neighbor he knew. The door opened, and Eli stood there in a gray t-shirt and jeans, the light from a desk lamp casting shadows on his face. His green eyes flickered with surprise, then softened as he saw her shivering in the rain. Vivian, he said, his voice hesitant, as if unsure which name to use. She shook her head, stepping inside before he could invite her, unwilling to stay out a second longer. Rain dripped from her onto the wooden floor, pooling in small patches. Eli, I'm sorry, she said, her voice hoarse from the cold and surging emotions. I didn't mean to hide from you. I was just scared that if you knew who I was, you'd see me differently. She stood in the middle of his small apartment, where the scent of coffee and old wood mingled, where family photos hung on the walls and computer parts cluttered the desk. This was a place she'd once felt safe, and now she feared she'd lost it. Eli closed the door but said nothing, just looked at her with unwavering sincerity. Vivian took a deep breath, forcing herself to go on. I was the CEO of G-Tech, she said, her voice shaking. I built it from nothing, but Michael, my ex-husband, betrayed me. He had an affair, took the company, and left me with nothing. I came to this neighborhood as a fugitive, Eli. I didn't think I deserved your kindness, or anyone's. She stopped, waiting, for anger for him to turn away, or at least to look at her with distance. But Eli only stepped closer, the space between them shrinking. Vi, he said, his voice low but steady, I don't care if you're Vivian Grant or Vi. I care about who you are with me. The person who laughs when paint gets on her face, who helps Mia draw her dream house, who makes cookies with Mrs. Helen even though she can't bake. He paused, his eyes locked on hers. The person who makes my heart race every time she walks into a room. His words melted the ice in Vivian's chest. She burst into tears, not from pain, but from relief, knowing she hadn't lost him. She rushed into his arms and Eli held her tightly, his hands gentle but firm, as if shielding her from the world. The rain still fell outside, its patter echoing the night they met at the bus stop, but now it carried no despair. I thought I'd lose you, she whispered, her face buried in his chest, feeling the warmth of his shirt. Eli shook his head, murmuring into her hair, You won't lose me, Vi. Never. They stood there in his small apartment, their heartbeats sinking, as if every divide between Vivian Grant and Vi, between CEO and neighbor, had dissolved. Eli led her to the sofa, grabbing a towel to dry her hair, his movements gentle but clumsy, making her laugh through her tears. You're terrible at this, she teased, and he shrugged, his smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. I'm better at fixing computers, but I'm trying. She took his hand, fingers interlocking. Thank you, Eli, for not giving up on me. He looked at her, more serious than usual. I don't give up on what matters, Vi, and you're what matters most. They sat there as the rain softened outside, and Vivian felt a new faith budding, not just in Eli, but in herself, in her chance to build a life worth living. The next morning, the first sunlight after the rain slipped through Vivian's curtains, illuminating her apartment. She stood by the window, phone in hand, the screen lit with a call from Michael. His voice came through smooth as ever. Vivian, I'm serious. Come back to G-Tech, even just as a figurehead advisor. You're still the face of the company. Don't throw it all away. His words once had the power to pull her into ambition's whirlpool, but now they were just a passing breeze. She looked outside where Eli was fixing Mia's bike, the girl beaming as he playfully fumbled the tire. Vivian smiled, a resolute smile she thought she'd lost. I'm not coming back, Michael, she said, her voice calm but sharp. I found where I belong, and it's not G-Tech. Good luck. She hung up before he could reply, feeling as if she'd shed a final burden. Vivian stepped outside, the morning air fresh and cool. Mia waved when she saw her. Miss Vi, Uncle Eli says he's teaching me to paint walls today. Eli looked up, meeting her eyes, and his smile stirred her heart. She walked over, sitting beside him on the grass, watching Mia run off for a brush. Everything okay? He asked, his voice gentle. She nodded, taking his hand. Better than ever. I'm ready to face my past, Eli, not by running, but by building a future with you. He pulled her close, kissing her forehead lightly. Then let's get started, he said, and they laughed, sunlight bathing them like a promise of brighter days ahead. Vivian knew her journey wasn't over, but with Eli by her side, she no longer feared any rain. The gentle light of early autumn spread across the Seattle suburb, gilding the maple trees and weathered rooftops. Vivian sat in a small room at the community center, a laptop and a whiteboard covered in notes before her. An idea for a tech platform to support those with emotional wounds, from divorce, loss, or invisible scars, was taking shape. She called it Beacon, hoping it would be a lighthouse for those lost, as she once was. Eli sat across from her, holding a coffee mug, listening as she explained how the app would connect users to support groups and experts. He wasn't tech-savvy, but his eyes lit up whenever she spoke of helping others. It could work like this, Vivian said, pointing to a diagram on the board. Users sign up anonymously, share their stories, and get matched with others who've been through similar things, like my blog, but bigger. Eli nodded, jotting down ideas for integrating Beacon into the community center's activities. I like it, he said. The center could host in-person meetups. Mrs. Helen would be thrilled. Vivian smiled, feeling his support like a steady anchor. In the weeks since they reconciled in the rain, she'd come to see Eli not just as the man she loved, but as a partner who made her believe she could make a difference. But not everything was smooth. The media hadn't let go of Vivian. After her blog, Journey from Ashes, was exposed, Reporters kept calling, some even lurking near the neighborhood with cameras, hunting for former CEO Vivian Grant. A recent article dubbed her the runaway CEO, with cruel comments suggesting she was playing humble for public sympathy. The piece angered Vivian, but deeper was her fear that this attention would harm her project and the neighborhood she cherished. She tossed her phone on the table, sighing. "They don't get it, Eli. Beacon isn't a stunt or PR. It's my heart." Eli rested a hand on her shoulder, his voice low and firm. "They don't get to define you, Vi. This is your idea from your heart. I'm here no matter what." His words were a cool breeze, easing some of the pressure. But challenges didn't end with the media. An email from G-Tech's lawyers arrived that morning, demanding she sign a non-disclosure agreement, implying they'd sue if she used any ideas from her CEO days. Vivian knew this was Michael's move, her ex-husband, trying to pull her back into his shadow. "They think they can control me forever," she said, her voice edged with bitterness. Vivian knew she needed to do something bigger to break free of the past. That night, in her small apartment, she opened her laptop and wrote a new blog post, this time not anonymously. "I am Vivian Grant," she began, "and this is my real story of failure, pain, and how I found myself again through kind people." She wrote of the rainy night at the bus stop, the neighborhood that welcomed her, the man who gave her a jacket, not naming Eli, but letting love shine through every line. She wrote about Beacon, her dream to help others find light as she had. When she hit publish, she trembled, not from fear, but from freedom. The post spread quickly, drawing thousands of comments from strangers saying her story gave them hope. One afternoon, as Vivian and Eli checked progress on the community center's renovations, now with a new classroom and playground, a figure appeared at the door. Claire, Vivian's former assistant, stood there, no longer the sharp-edged woman from their last meeting. She wore a simple coat, her eyes hesitant. "Vivian, I read your blog," Claire said. "I was wrong to push you back to G-Tech. I see what you're doing with Beacon, and I want to help, if you'll let me." Vivian was stunned. She'd thought Claire had chosen Michael, had become part of the world she'd left behind. But now she saw a new sincerity in the woman, as if Claire, too, was trying to right her wrongs. After a moment's silence, Vivian nodded. "Thank you, Claire. I could really use someone like you." Claire smiled, her eyes bright with relief. From then on, she became an unexpected ally, bringing expertise in interface design and media strategy to Beacon. She worked with Vivian, suggesting ways to make the app more user-friendly, and even connected with volunteer psychologists. Eli teased that Claire was Vi's more serious twin, making all three laugh. They worked tirelessly, from lively meetings at the community center to late nights in Vivian's apartment, fueled by Mrs. Helen's cookies. Eli helped by rallying neighborhood volunteers, from Tom, who wired the new electrical system, to Mia, who drew a lighthouse logo for Beacon. The project became a communal effort, and Vivian felt her old confidence return. Not the arrogance of a CEO, but a belief in creating change from the heart. One evening, as they sat on the center steps, the horizon ablaze with sunset, Eli looked at her, his voice full of pride. "You're doing something huge, Vi. I'm proud to be part of it." Vivian took his hand, her heart full. "I couldn't have done it without you, Eli. You're my lighthouse." He smiled, pulling her close, and they sat there, basking in the peace of a journey beginning to bloom. Seattle's largest tech conference unfolded in a gleaming convention center, its glass walls reflecting dazzling lights as hundreds gathered, startup founders to seasoned investors. Vivian stood on stage wearing a simple blue dress, her black hair loose and natural. No trace of the Ice Queen who once ran G-Tech. She wasn't here to flaunt achievements or reclaim fame. She was here to share her story, Beacon's story, and the people who helped her rediscover herself. In the front row, Eli sat in Tom's borrowed suit, slightly tight at the shoulders, but not dimming his radiant smile. He'd never seen Vivian so confident, not from power, but from living true to her heart. Vivian took a deep breath, her eyes sweeping the auditorium before she began. "I used to think power was everything," she said, her voice clear and warm, resonating through the mic. "Shares, reputation, numbers on a balance sheet. That was my world. But a year ago, I stood shivering in the rain, having lost it all. My company, my trust, myself. Then someone gave me a jacket, for no reason but kindness. That's real power. She paused, looking at Eli, and he nodded slightly, his eyes saying he'd always be there, as promised. She spoke of the suburban neighborhood where neighbors became family, from Mrs. Helen with her healing cookies to Mia with her colorful drawings. She talked about Beacon, the platform she built to help others find light after darkness, as she had. Beacon isn't just an app, she stressed, her voice brimming with passion. It's proof that everyone deserves a new day, no matter how painful their past. She shared her journey, failure, hurt, and learning that happiness isn't found at the peak of power, but in small things. A hug, a smile, someone holding your hand when you fall. The room fell silent, then erupted in resounding applause. Beacon, though not yet launched, had gained fervent support from Vivian's public blog post, now a focal point on online forums and social media. Investors sent emails, not to control, but to partner, persuaded by her vision. But what moved Vivian most were letters from strangers, hundreds writing that her story gave them courage to move on after divorce, loss, or dark days. As she left the stage, the crowd stood, and Eli was the first to reach her, pulling her into a tight hug. "You were amazing," he whispered, his voice thick with pride. Vivian smiled, cheeks flushed, correcting him. "We were amazing, Eli." They stood there a moment, hands clasped amid the congratulating crowd, as if nothing could pull them apart. Claire, now an indispensable Beacon partner, approached, handing Vivian a glass of water. "You made the whole room cry," she said, winking. Vivian laughed, sensing the change not just in herself, but in Claire. From a cold assistant to a true friend. Tom appeared, clapping Eli's shoulder hard, teasing, "If you don't buy me dinner after this, I'm fixing my own computer from now on." The air filled with laughter, and Vivian knew this moment, not a boardroom or contract, was her greatest success. A week later, Eli's community center officially opened, marking a new milestone for the neighborhood. The once run-down building now shone with a sign reading, "Community is home," alongside a vibrant playground and a classroom for Beacon's counseling sessions. The ceremony drew not just locals, but city reporters, curious about the place that inspired Vivian Grant and her game-changing tech project. Mrs. Helen, in her familiar floral apron, cut the ribbon, her eyes twinkling as she addressed the crowd. "I told you this neighborhood was special," she declared, sparking loud laughter. Mia darted across the yard, clutching a blue balloon, shrieking when she saw Vivian and Eli arrive. "Miss Vi, Uncle Eli, this is our new home," she cheered, tugging them to see her lighthouse painting hung in the classroom. Claire stood beside Vivian, proud as she saw Beacon's logo on promotional materials. She whispered, "You've changed everything, Vivian." "I'm glad to be part of it." Vivian squeezed her hand, replying, "We did it together, Claire." Eli took Vivian's hand, leading her to the yard where people gathered around outdoor tables. He looked at the scene, Mrs. Helen's storytelling, Tom arguing with a neighbor about grilling, kids running wild, and smiled. "Who knew a jacket would lead to this?" he said, winking at Vivian. She laughed, resting her head on his shoulder, feeling her heart could hold no more joy. "You didn't just give me a jacket, Eli. You gave me a world." As the sun set, golden orange light bathed the neighborhood. Vivian and Eli stood side by side, gazing at the community center glowing like a true lighthouse. They didn't say much, just held hands, knowing they'd found each other themselves. And most importantly, the belief that love and kindness could change everything. Tucked in Vivian's pocket was a draft letter from a publisher. They wanted to turn her blog into a book. But today, she just wanted to live this moment fully, with Eli and her new family. Rain fell on Seattle again, gentle but persistent, a reminder of days gone by. A year had passed since the night Vivian stood shivering at the bus stop, stripped of everything but a faint spark of hope kindled by Eli's jacket. Now the Pine Avenue bus stop remained unchanged, faded route sign, wet plastic chairs, but Vivian was no longer a lost woman. She stood beneath the red umbrella Mrs. Helen had given her, in a blue sweater and jeans, her black hair loose, her eyes alight with joy. Eli had asked her to meet here, saying he wanted to tell her something, but his hesitant tone on the phone left her curious and nervous. She glanced at her watch, then looked up as Eli approached from the corner. He carried no umbrella, his plaid shirt damp with rain, but his smile warmed the chilly drizzle. "You're 5 minutes late," Vivian teased, tilting her umbrella to cover him. Eli shrugged, his eyes twinkling. "Had to make sure everything was perfect." She frowned, not understanding, but her heart raced as he took her hand, pulling her from under the umbrella. Light rain speckled their shoulders, but Vivian didn't care. Something in his gaze, tender, resolute, made her forget the cold. Eli took a deep breath, as if summoning all his courage. "Vi," he began, his voice low but clear. "A year ago, I saw you standing here, shivering. I didn't know who you were, just that I couldn't walk by without doing something. I gave you my jacket, thinking it was a small moment. Turns out it was the biggest moment of my life." Vivian's eyes stung, but she smiled, squeezing his hand to urge him on. He knelt on one knee, right there at the bus stop, rain streaking his face. From his pocket he pulled a small box, opening it to reveal a simple silver ring, no gemstones, just an intricate wave-like engraving. "The first time I met you, you were shaking from the cold," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Today, I want to keep you warm for life. Vivian Grant, will you marry me?" Vivian froze, rain mingling with tears on her cheeks. She'd once thought love was a fragile luxury, but Eli, with his unwavering kindness, standing by her through every trial, showed her it was the simplest, strongest thing. She nodded, unable to speak, then laughed as he stood, pulling her into his arms. "Yes, Eli, yes," she whispered, and he slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands trembling with joy. They held each other in the rain, laughing like kids, heedless of the water soaking their clothes. Vivian rested her head on Eli's chest, hearing his steady heartbeat, feeling the world shrink to just them. "I worried the ring wasn't fancy enough," he said, a hint of concern in his voice. Vivian shook her head, kissing his cheek. "It's perfect, because you chose it." The rain kept falling, but this time it carried no despair, only the freshness of a new beginning. As they left the bus stop hand in hand, Eli led her to the community center, saying Mrs. Helen wanted to discuss Beacon. Vivian didn't suspect a thing until they stepped inside. Lights flared and shouts rang out, "Congratulations!" The whole neighborhood was there. Mrs. Helen, Tom, Mia, Claire, and dozens of others gathered around a long table laden with cookies, cornbread, and a homemade cake inscribed with "Forever Together." Vivian stood stunned, turning to Eli, who grinned ear to ear. "Told Mrs. Helen last week," he whispered. She couldn't wait. Mrs. Helen swept Vivian into a hug so tight it made her laugh. "Knew that boy would pull it off," she said, eyes sparkling. "You're our neighborhood's greatest gift, Vi." Tom slapped Eli's shoulder, handing him a beer. "You took your sweet time. I bet you'd have waited another year." Mia rushed up, hugging Vivian's legs, shouting, "Miss Vi's gonna wear the prettiest wedding dress, right?" Vivian knelt, ruffling her hair. "Absolutely, but only if you help me pick." The party stretched late, filled with country music from an old radio and lively stories. Claire, now Vivian's close friend, raised a glass, saying Beacon wouldn't be here without their love. Vivian held Eli's hand, feeling the cool ring on her finger, knowing she'd overcome every challenge, not just to find herself, but to find a family, a true home. As guests trickled out, Vivian and Eli stood in the yard, under the last glowing lanterns. The rain had stopped, leaving a starlit sky. "I never thought I could be this happy," she said, leaning into him. Eli kissed her forehead, whispering, "Me neither, Vi. I'll do everything to keep that smile on your face." They stood, wrapped in each other, joy overflowing, knowing they'd face whatever came together. Spring 2026 bathed Seattle in radiant gold, as if the city itself blessed Vivian and Eli's big day. The community center, once a weathered shell, now pulsed with life, freshly painted walls, blooming tulip gardens, and a playground alive with children's laughter. Today it hosted their simple yet heartfelt wedding, adorned with white ribbons strung on trees and long tables brimming with cornbread, cookies, and flowers prepared by Mrs. Helen and neighbors. Vivian stood in a small room behind the center, wearing a knee-length white dress chosen with 8-year-old Mia's eager help. Claire adjusted the thin veil in her hair, smiling. "You look stunning, Vivian. Eli's gonna faint." Vivian laughed, grasping Claire's hand. "Thanks for being here. For everything." Mia burst in, clutching a bundle of wild daisies, shouting, "Miss Vi, it's time!" Vivian took a deep breath, her heart racing, not from nerves but pure happiness. Outside, Eli stood with Tom, his reluctant best man, fussing with his tie awkwardly. In a navy suit, his brown hair neatly combed, Eli's familiar easy smile remained. As violin music, played by a neighbor, swelled, everyone turned, and Eli's breath caught when Vivian appeared. She wasn't beautiful for her dress or the sunlight in her hair, but for the love and trust in her eyes, something he once thought he'd never have. Mrs. Helen, officiating, stood between them, her voice warm. "Today we're here to witness the love of two people who've made this neighborhood a bigger family." Vivian and Eli held hands, exchanging vows. Eli went first, his voice steady. "Vi, I promise to always be the one who gives you a jacket, rain or shine, good days or bad. I promise to love you, respect you, and make you laugh every day." Vivian smiled, eyes misty with joy. "Eli," she replied, "you showed me what love is. Home, hope. I promise to stand by you, share every dream, and keep you warm as you've done for me." They exchanged rings. Eli's simple silver band now paired with one for him, engraved with "one step at a time," a nod to their journey. As Mrs. Helen pronounced them married, Eli drew Vivian into a kiss amid cheers and applause. Mia tossed daisies into the air, Tom whistled, and Claire wiped tears, whispering to Mrs. Helen, "I've never seen her this happy." The reception brimmed with laughter. Tables overflowed with neighborhood dishes, from Mrs. Helen's pumpkin soup to Tom's cornbread. Country music played, and Eli pulled Vivian to dance, admitting he only knew basic steps. She laughed as he spun her dress flaring. "You're a terrible dancer," she teased. "But I love this terrible dancer," he replied, kissing her forehead. Mid-party, Vivian and Eli shared news. The community center would expand into a support network, partnering with Beacon to bring counseling and activities to more Seattle neighborhoods. "We want everyone to have a place to heal," Vivian said, her hand in Eli's. The crowd cheered, and Mrs. Helen raised her lemonade glass. "To Vi and Eli, who make us believe in good things." Vivian looked around, Mia sketching a wedding gift, Claire chatting with Tom, Mrs. Helen hugging everyone like a mother. This neighborhood wasn't just where she found Eli, but where she found family. A year ago, she thought she'd lost everything. Now she had more than she'd ever dreamed. Late afternoon, after guests left, Vivian and Eli walked to the Pine Avenue bus stop where it all began. Warm sunlight shone, no rain, just spring's gentle breath. They sat on the old plastic bench, hands clasped, their rings glinting. "Did you ever think we'd get here?" Vivian asked, resting her head on his shoulder. Eli smiled, stroking her hair. "No, but that night I gave you my jacket. I knew I wanted to see you again." Vivian pulled a newly published book from her bag, its cover reading "Journey from Ashes" with her name, Vivian Grant, in bold. Her blog had become a book, selling thousands and inspiring millions worldwide. She opened the first page where she'd written, "To Eli, who gave me a new day." He read it, eyes shining, then pulled her into a hug. "You make me proud every day, Vi." They sat under the warm sun, watching buses pass, saying nothing more. Words weren't needed. They'd found each other, love, and a vow to endure. In the distance, the neighborhood echoed with children's laughter, a song of hope closing their journey, complete and radiant. Thank you for following this heartfelt story of Soul Stories channel. Share your thoughts about the story in the comments below. If you believe that true love can withstand all trials and sometimes begins in the simplest of ways, don't forget to hit the like button and share this story with your friends. To never miss out on touching and meaningful stories, subscribe to our channel and help us spread messages of love and warmth to everyone. Let's cherish the beautiful moments of life and love together.